Hi everybody, I hope this video finds you all well and these circumstances end well. We have our first session and in our first session we are going to talk about the introductory topics in linguistics. That is, what is linguistics, what do we study there, and what is the approach in order to study language. And then we'll continue with the differences between human language and animal language, and we will finish this chapter with the relationship between language and thought. So in this session, we talk about linguistic knowledge, and as we are going to cover this, we will talk about knowledge of sound system, knowledge of words, knowledge of sentences and non-sentences. Then we talk about creativity in language use, and linguistic competence, linguistic performance as two different constructs that we need to pay attention to make a differentiation between what people know and what people do, and between descriptive and prescriptive grammar, that is the kind of grammar that linguists have, and the traditional grammar that you know, the universal grammar that is put forward by Noam Chomsky, and we'll finish today's session with sign languages. What do we know if we know a language? Well, we have a knowledge of what are the sounds that belong to a certain language. Let's have a look at these sounds. As we are going through these sounds, p, f, j, f, u, ch. So which of these sounds are English and which are not? You have a knowledge of English, and therefore you can tell me that the one that doesn't belong to English is ch sound, because that's the sound you can find in Persian. And when it comes to Persian, as a Persian speaker, and if you ask your sister, your brother, and want them to tell you which of these sounds are Persian and which are not, all of them would come up with the same answer. That is, they have a knowledge of what are the sounds of a language and what are not the sounds of a language. Even your grandmother can tell you that we do not have th sound in Persian or u sound in Persian. And if they hear it from you, they might think that you are not pronouncing u sound correctly. That is, they try to assimilate it to the closest sound in their own language, if they want to be very tolerant of your pronunciation. Otherwise, they would say that we do not have an u sound. So then, when we know a language, we all know what are the sounds of a language and what are not the sounds of a language. The other thing that we know about the sounds of a language is their distribution. That is, where do they come? Do they come at the beginning? Do they come at the end of a syllable? For example, all of you know that ng, which is an English sound, would not come at the beginning of a syllable. It always comes at the end of a syllable. The other thing, or the other piece of knowledge that you would have if you know a language and if you know the sound system of a language, is phonotactics. That is, what are the sound patterns in those languages that you know. For example, if you are given a word with a consonant cluster, like student, well, it is English, and if you, as a Persian speaker of English, want to pronounce that and you are not trained to pronounce consonant clusters, what would you do is that you insert a before s in order to make a permissible sound pattern in Persian. So student starts with st, which is a sound sequence that is not allowed in Persian, but it is permissible in English. So then when we know the sound system of a language, we know what are the phonemes in that language, where they appear, and in what patterns they appear. Another part of our linguistic knowledge is the knowledge of the words. We know what are the words of a language. If you are asked if a word like voice recorder, is it English? Is it Persian? Well, you know that it is English. Computer, is it English, Persian? It is English. What about computer? Computer is a word that is borrowed from English, and it has changed its pronunciation to become similar to the sound system of Persian. But you know that it is a loan word from English. But a word like Rayane, you know that it is Persian, that it is made for Persian speakers, not so that they would not use computer anymore. Another part of knowledge that you have about words is how words are formed. You have an idea of word formation. What is the internal structure of words? What are the rules that you use in order to create new words? For example, in the words sister and worker, you have a clear idea that in sister you do not have any affix, but in worker it is made up of word plus er. So this is the knowledge that you have about the sound, about the word formation or word internal structure of English. That's the same when it comes to Persian. When you are given the word behtar, you can say that, well, behtar is made up of beh and tar, and beh means good, and tar is a comparative form, and it's equivalent to better. Also, in a word like kitabkhane, you know that it is a word that is made up of two different nouns, two nouns, and they are combined in order to make a noun. And we said that we have an idea of how to create new words. Rayane, Yarane, they were the words that were created in order to meet the new requirements. That is, the words that were necessary to be created based on the circumstances. And recently, there has been a word, covided, in order to say that, and it has been given 3 different meanings, and you know that COVID is a word that has come into being just recently, and from COVID they have made a covidiot in order to say that, this person is such an idiot that is not afraid of coronavirus and ignores the observations that they should make. So they needed a word in order to convey a meaning, and they created that. And it was because they had a knowledge of the language English, they came up with this word. So the three parts to the knowledge of words is that what are the words, how they are formed, and how they are how you can create new words. One thing about the knowledge that we have about the words is the relationship between form and meaning. The relation between form and meaning is arbitrary. What do we mean by arbitrary? So there is nothing natural about the relationship between dog and that animal dog that is there in the nature. The same that you do not have any natural relationship between hund and that animal that you see in the nature, or chien and that animal, or cat and that animal, or sag and that animal. Actually having different words for the same object, for the same animal in different languages shows that, well, people of every language have come up with words for the object based on conventions. That is, they have created the words, they have come up with the words based on a convention. They have decided to use that form with that certain meaning, and it is now a part of their linguistic knowledge, their mental lexicon. So the relationship between form and meaning, and form is word and meaning is arbitrary. There is no natural relationship between word and the meaning that it has, between the word and the object that it refers to. And people would come up with this relationship based on some conventions that they make. Even words that might have been said to resemble the sounds of the nature, like buzz, murmur, or in Persian, ba, shur, shur. Even these words, they do not have a natural relationship to the words, to those things that they signify in the real word, and they are just arbitrary forms. Otherwise, why is it that you have buzz in English, but you have another word, viz, in Persian? So it seems that, however, we have words that their pronunciation suggests their meaning, but these words, they do not have any natural relationship to the things that they signify, to those objects. And the name for these words whose pronunciation suggests their meanings is onomatopoeia and sound symbolism. Sound symbolism or onomatopoeic words are words whose pronunciation suggests their meanings. Let's, for fun, have a look at this cartoon. Well, about the knowledge of the words, read that and see how they have come up with words just because they needed that. Actually, the reason that we add words to a language is because we need them and we create them. We need some more words for our language. What are we going to call that big bird thing with the leathery wings? What about pterodactyl? Pterodactyl? Well, what do you want to call it? Ron. Ron? Ron. Well, at least people will be able to spell it. Okay, so that's all by convention that we come up with words, and that's why we have Persian Academy or Academy for Other Languages and people sit there and they decide how to create new words. Another part of our linguistic knowledge is the knowledge of sentences and non-sentences. We have a clear idea of what are the well-formed and what are the ill-formed sentences in the language. Like even somebody who might be illiterate or who has no literacy, no reading literacy, they know that for Persian speakers, they know that the sentence من ساعت 3 غذا خوردم is an acceptable, a well-formed sentence in Persian, but the sentence دیر خوردم 3 ساعت غذا is an ill-formed sentence. But in English, the English speakers can easily say that it's difficult to go there is well-formed, but it is anxious to go John is ill-formed, because go is not a transitive verb, and also anxious cannot be used in this way, the way that difficult is used. So based on this, we can come to the conclusion that sentences, they follow some rules, and they have some kind of hierarchical relationship to each other. For example, غذا خوردم, well, they are related to each other, and mostly they come close to each other within a sentence, and they make one phrase. We will learn more about phrases. But what we need to consider is that sentences are not formed by placing words one after another, but that they have a hierarchical organization, and what decides the hierarchical organization is the rules of a language. And the rules of a language is grammar. The grammar that tells us how words are formed, how phrases are formed, and how sentences are formed. Related to syntax, and that there are rules, certain specific rules, and we have a limited set of units, but that we can use them in order to create lots of sentences, and we can understand unlimited number of sentences, even sentences that are ill-formed. In the previous slide, so however, these sentences are ill-formed. دیر خوردم 3 ساعت غذا, or it is anxious to go John. However, they are ill-formed, but you know what they mean. That is, you understand them. And that's why you can decide that, well, they are not based on the rules of English or rules of Persian, and that they do not mean anything. But the meaning of every single word you know, and that is why you understand that these are ill-formed sentences. We have a knowledge to say whether it is well-formed or it is ill-formed. Creativity, what's it? Well, we said that the idea that you have this knowledge to even say whether a sentence is well-formed or ill-formed is because of our capability to use language creatively. Let's start with this extract from the dinner party. So, are you saying that you were the best friend of the woman who was married to the man who represented your husband in divorce? In the history of speech, that sentence has never been uttered before. Well, as we are reading the sentence that is made by Albert, it's not easy to get the meaning of it. And in most cases, however, these sentences are possible. That is, it's okay to have sentences that are long and sentences that are complex, and that you can add a sentence to another sentence by using that. But this is not what you really would do. It's because of the physiological and psychological limitations that we human beings have, that we lose track of ideas when we are given complex sentences like this. But theoretically speaking, well, speakers have the ability to use the limited number of linguistic rules and units in order to produce and understand unlimited number of sentences, and with different degrees of complexity and with different lengths. For example, as an example of a complex sentence that can be made even more complex, this is the house. So this is a simple sentence, but if you add that Jack built, it becomes complex, because you have one matrix sentence that embeds another sentence, a subordinate sentence. This is the house that Jack built. You can make it longer and more complex by adding, this is the cat that lives in the house that Jack built. Or you might repeatedly use a certain rule. For example, you might repeatedly use an adjective within a sentence. The old man came. The old man came. Well, this is possible theoretically, but people would not do it due to what we talked about, that there are some limitations. And like what we talked about, that language can be used creatively, but there are some limitations that because of those limitations, we prefer to make short sentences that are easily, that can be easily processed by our listeners. Let's read this conversation between the White Queen and Alice from Through the Looking Glass. And you do addition? The White Queen asked. What's 1 and 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 1? I don't know, said Alice. I lost count. She can't do addition, the Red Queen interrupted. So you see, theoretically, there is no limit to the length of the sentence, but in practice, very long sentences are improbable because of the limitations that we have in physiology and in our psychological processing, that is, in our processing system. When we are talking about what is theoretically possible, or when we are talking about the knowledge that we have, no matter if we are literate or illiterate, because that's something that we have lived with. From the time that we are born, we are exposed to language, we have learned it, and now every language speaker, they would have a knowledge about the words. They have a knowledge about the grammar of a language, and that knowledge enables them to produce and understand sentences. This knowledge that we have, and in most cases it is unconscious, this unconscious knowledge that we have about the words and the grammar of the language, that enables us to produce the language or understand the language, even the sentences that have not been produced before, or the sentences that we have not produced before. This is linguistic competence. Linguistic performance is how we use this linguistic competence, this knowledge that we have about the language, the words and the grammar, into practice. when we are actually producing a speech, or when we are engaged in language comprehension. So then the difference between competence and performance is that competence is that unconscious knowledge that we have about the language, and linguistic performance is how we perform the language, how we really actually use it. We physically produce that. So we have already talked about grammar, but what is grammar that we are talking about? The kind of grammar that linguists are talking about is different from the traditional grammar that you might have in mind. Grammar here means the knowledge that the speakers have about the units of language, about the words, about the sentences, about the sounds, about the meaning, and the rules of grammar. The kind of grammar that linguists would try to come up with is a model of what speakers know. That is, it is a model of speakers' linguistic capacity. It describes what you know about their language. That is why it is called descriptive grammar, because it's not going to tell you what you should do or what you should not do, but that it looks at, they look at how people are using the language, and based on how they are using the language, and based on the judgments that they made. For example, they are given sentences and they would be asked whether they are ill-formed or well-formed. Based on them, they come up with a model of language, and they describe what people know about a language, if they know a language. This would be the outcome of this would be a descriptive grammar of that language. In that grammar, they talk about how you combine sounds into words, which is what we would be discussing in phonology. Actually, we are not going to discuss phonology. We have already talked about it in the previous semester. How you form words. That is what we are going to cover in morphology. How you combine words into phrases, and how you combine phrases into sentence. That would be syntax. And how you assign meaning to words and sentences. Linguists are going to describe a grammar based on this knowledge and what speakers are really doing, what they really practice, their real judgments, their judgments about that, their intuitions. The judgments that speakers have about language is called intuition. Based on their intuition, they come up with a grammar of what people are doing. A grammatical sentence based on descriptive grammar would be the sentence that conforms to the rules of the mental grammar that they have written, this descriptive grammar that they have come up with based on what people are doing, the model that they have from how people are using the language. An ungrammatical sentence is the one that deviates from the rules. But the kind of grammar that you might have in mind is what is called prescriptive grammar. The traditional grammar is prescriptive. Why is it prescriptive? Because it tells you what is correct and what is not, what you must do and what you must not do. And in all of their judgments, they have one ideal, standard, prestigious language in mind, and based on that, they would tell you what to do and what not to do. For example, they would say that you and me is not correct, and you should use you and I based on the procedure, based on the rules of Latin, because Latin has been the prestigious standard language. Or for Persian, they might make some judgments, some prescriptions. They make some prescriptions based on Arabic. So the type of grammar then we are going to talk about, and we would be talking about through this course, would be descriptive grammar, the grammar about the knowledge that language speakers have, and in order to have that grammar, they need not have any formal teaching, any literacy in order to know the language, because they are exposed to the language since they are born, and they have learned it throughout their life. Linguists, when they have been studying grammar, and they have come up with rules for example, Persian, and rules for English, and rules for German, rules for French, that are specific languages. They have come up with some observations that they have. All of these languages have something in common. For example, that all of these languages have nouns, or all of these languages have verbs. This has led Chomsky to come up with the idea of universal grammar. What is universal grammar? He says that this is the blueprint that all languages follow, and all human beings are born with this blueprint. That is, this is a kind of faculty. This language faculty is a kind of faculty that is biologically endowed, that when we are born, we are genetically wired with this human language capacity. And the major aim of linguistic theory based on Chomsky is to discover the nature of UG. Like, what is UG? What are the rules, principles that are shared by all languages? What they want to do in linguistics is to reveal the laws of human language. It's like what biologists are trying to do, or what those scholars of physics are going to do. Linguistics is a scientific field of study. They study different languages, and they want to find what is it that is shared between languages, that is shared by all languages, and what is specific to every single language. That we have a universal grammar, that human beings have a blueprint for language. The evidence comes from the sign languages. A language like American Sign Language, they provide evidence that languages are governed by the same universal principles. What do we mean by that? Well, in the sign languages, they have units like gestures and some rules in order to combine those gestures in order to make words, and in order to make phrases, and in order to make sentences. And their learning proceeds in the same way that other natural human languages proceed. For example, they start with babbling, with the gestures, and then they continue with making their first association of gestures with the words, with the meaning, the way that in a spoken language, in the development of a spoken language, we would see there that the first words that are associated with objects or appear at a certain age, that would be the same for sign language. And when they have looked at the brain, they have observed that the brain works in the same way as when people are using spoken language. That is, the same parts in the brain are activated when sign language is used. So this would tell us that language is something universal to all human beings, and any of natural human languages, no matter if it is spoken or if it is sign language, they follow the same principles. That is, in the sign languages we have nouns the way that we have nouns in spoken languages. We have words in sign languages the way that we have words in spoken languages. We have sentences there the way that we have sentences here. But that how the different words or phrases within the sentence are combined are governed by rules of that specific language. And these are all the things that we are going to discuss in this semester as we are going through the different components of linguistic knowledge and linguistics.